l'alcalde de Barberà del Vallès, pronunciar la frase "no a la guerra" avui té més sentit que mai. Reivindiquem els drets humans. Dins del cicle de conferències organitzada per les Ciutats Defensores dels Drets Humans, defensem a qui ens defensa. Avui contem amb la presència de la Sol Taule, advocada filipina que defensa precisament a les persones defensores dels drets humans del seu país i a totes les persones que són discriminades de forma evident des del seu propi estat. Per tant, avui, a Barberà del Vallès, on a la façana de l'Ajuntament està desplegada la pancarta "Barberà per la Pau", comptem amb la presència d'una de les persones que més està fent pels drets humans al seu país. Sol, you have the floor.
Thank you so much to the mayor. It's an honor and privilege to be here in your town. It's my first time in Barcelona, but I'm really glad I came all the way from the Philippines to tell you the stories that we are experiencing on the ground. I have a presentation. It's in English, but my good friend David here will translate in Catalan, right? Yeah.
Bon dia, moltíssimes gràcies al senyor alcalde per haver-nos acollit aquí a la ciutat de Barberà del Vallès. És per mi un honor i un privilegi ser aquí. És la primera vegada que visito Barcelona i estic molt contenta de poder compartir amb vosaltres la situació al meu país en quant als drets humans. La presentació de Maria Sol és en anglès i, per tant, el David i jo traduiré cap al català la seva presentació.
So I will be starting. Again, I'm part of the 12th edition of the Cities Defending Human Rights. I'm here going around towns in Catalonia, in municipalities in Catalonia, with other rights defenders from Ghana and various countries in Latin America, in El Salvador, in Colombia, in Mexico. And we all share probably different experiences, but same kind of oppression in our respective countries. Now here is my presentation, the human rights situation in the Philippines.
Comencem, doncs. És per mi un plaer i soc participant en aquesta 12a edició del projecte Ciutats Defensores dels Drets Humans. Portem ja uns quants dies visitant diferents municipis de Catalunya juntament amb altres activistes dels drets humans de països com Ghana i diversos països de Llatinoamèrica com El Salvador, Colòmbia o Mèxic. Tots venim aquí amb les nostres experiències que són diferents, però totes aquestes experiències tenen alguns elements en comú.
Okay. I'm here in your country representing Karapatan. That's my organization. Karapatan, the English translation of the word, it's a Tagalog word, is rights. And Karapatan is an organization, is an alliance of organizations and individuals who are working for the promotion and defense of human rights in the Philippines. We have 16 regional chapters in our country, and all of those chapters are reporting the cases of human rights violations committed by state forces such as the military, even the paramilitaries, and the police who are carrying out President Duterte's anti-people policies in their respective regions.
Maria Sol Taule forma part d'una organització que es diu Karapatan, que és una paraula en tagalog que en anglès o en català vol dir drets. Karapatan és una aliança de diferents organitzacions i persones defensores dels drets humans. Karapatan té 16 oficines regionals repartides pel país i des d'aquestes oficines regionals el que fan és documentar les violacions dels drets humans comesos per membres de l'exèrcit i per els policies que apliquen les lleis del govern de les Filipines que persegueixen els defensors i defensores dels drets humans.
This photo is the members of Karapatan during our 5th National Congress. But some of them, I will tell you later, some of them are already in jail. Some of them are facing trumped-up charges because of their work.
En aquesta fotografia podeu apreciar alguns dels membres de l'organització Karapatan durant el 5è Congrés Nacional de l'organització. Malauradament, i com us explicaré més endavant, alguns d'aquests membres de Karapatan han estat empresonats sota acusacions falses.
Okay, this next slide is intended really for my very young audiences because some of them do not know where the Philippines is or they don't know that such country exists. So as telling them that the Philippines is composed of 7,000 plus islands located in Southeast Asia, and our population is, as of 2022, is 109 million. You're quite a lot. And 14% of such population are national minorities living in far-flung rural areas in the mountains in the Philippines. Our major colonizers far back is Spain, which we are one of the countries colonized by Spain for 300 years. We have US also and Japan. And the Philippines is literally sitting on very rich natural resources. That's why many foreign mining companies are investing in the Philippines to exploit the natural resources. And our economy is basically dependent on agriculture. Many Filipinos are doing farming but doesn't have their own land. It's very problematic there because it's an agriculture country, but all the farmers, most of the farmers are really poor. And also, we mostly import raw materials in first world countries, in the US, in Europe. And a lot of, one of the most exported, what we call probably products or people in the Philippines is the overseas Filipino workers. A lot of professionals like me, some working as teachers, lawyers, doctors, and nurses, go to the US or Canada to work as caregivers, to go in service works. Because in the Philippines, it's really, the pay is really low. The minimum wage is around 8 euros per day. A family of 6 wouldn't survive such kind of pay.
Aquesta altra diapositiva la faig servir sobretot quan m'adreço a públics més joves que potser no coneixen on s'ubica el país i quina és la seva realitat. Les Filipines és un país del sud-est asiàtic, està composat per més de 7.000 illes i té una població en data 2020 dels 109 milions d'habitants. D'aquesta població, un 14% són minories, pobles indígenes que viuen en zones remotes del país, i les Filipines també va ser una colònia espanyola durant més de 300 anys, també va ser colònia del Japó i dels Estats Units. És un país ric en recursos naturals i és per això que hi ha moltes empreses mineres que tenen interès en instal·lar-se en el país. L'economia del país és predominantment agrícola, hi ha una gran part de la població filipina que treballa en l'agricultura, però el problema és que tot i que treballen la terra, sovint aquestes terres no són propietat dels agricultors mateixos. És un país també que exporta moltíssimes matèries primeres, especialment al món desenvolupat, als Estats Units, Europa, però un altre dels anomenats productes, podríem dir, que exporta a les Filipines són treballadors i treballadores. Professionals com podrien ser mestres, advocats o infermers i infermeres i metges, que sovint emigren a països com els Estats Units i Canadà perquè a les Filipines els sous són molt baixos. El sou mínim podríem dir que és de 8 euros al dia aproximadament i si ens imaginem un nucli familiar composat de 6 persones, doncs òbviament amb aquests sous no n'hi ha prou per arribar al final del mes.
This is how, basically, a summary of how the Philippine society looks like. It's like a triangle. And in the bottom is of the population, 75% of the Filipino people are mostly poor farmers. 15% are workers. 7 to 8% are people like me, the middle class. And 1 to 2% are landlords who own vast tracts of land in the Philippines and who happens to be running also in the elections. we are having our elections in the coming days on May 9, 2022. And they're the same people who are controlling basically the wealth of the country. This is the reason why also a lot of peasants are joining the armed revolution in the Philippines. They've been calling for land distribution for so long, decades of call for genuine agrarian reform. But of course, if you are a politician in the Philippines who own vast tracts of land, of course, it's against your interest to distribute your vast tracts of land. And that comes with a conflict with these various sectors in the Philippine society who are oppressed, who are calling for the respect of their rights, for the granting of their own interests, the workers, the peasants, the professionals, which will not be easily given to them by the Philippine government.
En aquesta altra diapositiva el que veiem és un diagrama que ens mostra més o menys la composició de la societat filipina. Un 75% de la població són agricultors pobres, un 15% són classe treballadora, un 7 o un 8% podríem dir que són classe mitjana i un 1% de la població són grans terratinents que a la mateixa vegada són els que ocupen els càrrecs de poder. De fet, el 9 de maig es celebraran eleccions presidencials al país. Aquest 1% de la població, a més, és qui controla la riquesa del país. I és per aquest motiu que molts dels agricultors pobres s'han unit a la revolució armada a les Filipines. Fa dècades que reclamen una redistribució de les terres, però aquestes terres, com ja hem dit abans, sovint estan en mans de la classe benestant del país, que a més són els que ostenten els càrrecs de poder, i aquí és on s'origina el conflicte que hi ha al país, perquè totes les classes treballadores, els agricultors pobres i la classe mitjana fa molt temps que venen reclamant una redistribució de la terra, que reclamen els seus drets, però els successius governs de les Filipines no han fet cas mai de les seves reclamacions.
And this is the reason that the data that you're seeing on your screen now are the numbers of human rights violations documented by my organization called Karapatan. Our human rights workers on the ground have gone to the very far mountains to document the cases of killings, abduction, bombing of communities. And in the Philippines, from July 2016, that's the time when President Duterte became the president, and until last year, December 2021, Karapatan documented a total of 427 cases of extrajudicial killings of activists, human rights workers, members of progressive organizations who are fighting for their rights in their different sectors. You will notice that out of the 427, the most number of killed sector is from the peasant sector. Out of 427, there's 331 peasants who have been killed under the administration of President Duterte. And no one, not one, has been put to jail because of these killings. We also have cases of enforced disappearances, torture, illegal arrest. And these huge numbers here are examples of what we call community violations. It's not committed on one person, but to the entire community. Some communities are forcibly displaced in the mountains because their communities are being tagged as bastion of rebels or supporters of the armed revolution. And so what the Philippine government do is they put military in there, threaten the people, and in some cases, they bomb the entire community.
En aquesta altra diapositiva el que veieu són unes xifres de les violacions dels drets humans que ha pogut documentar l'organització Karapatan. Karapatan compta amb membres, defensors i defensores dels drets humans que visiten les zones remotes i muntanyoses del país per documentar aquestes violacions de drets humans. Comptem amb assassinats extrajudicials, desaparicions, detencions. Aquestes xifres cobreixen el període entre juliol de 2016 i desembre de 2021, és a dir, el període de temps en el què ha estat president Duterte, i veureu que, per exemple, hem pogut documentar 427 assassinats de defensors i defensores de drets humans, de membres d'organitzacions progressistes que defensen els drets de les persones D'aquests 427 assassinats podreu veure també que 331 assassinats corresponen a agricultors pobres. Però ningú no ha acabat a la presó per aquests assassinats. Hi ha casos també de desaparicions forçoses, de tortures, de detencions, i després veiem unes altres xifres més elevades que corresponen a violacions comunitàries, és a dir, no són violacions de drets humans individuals, sinó de tota una comunitat. Hi ha comunitats senceres que viuen a les zones muntanyoses i remotes del país que han estat desplaçades de les seves terres perquè el govern i l'exèrcit el govern els acusa de ser bastions de terroristes o de donar suport a la revolució armada, i el que fan és enviar l'exèrcit perquè desplacin aquestes comunitats.
This photo is just an example of the one I'm telling you earlier. This photo is taken in southern Philippines, in Davao. This is the hometown of President Duterte. A lot of people there went forcibly evacuated because their communities are accused to be supporters of the armed movement. So the community feel threatened, and they went out of the mountain to seek refuge in churches, in gymnasiums, in the plazas. They live there for months because it's not safe in their communities anymore. So they bring with them their poultry, their chicken, their livestock, everything that they need to survive. And in the other photo, these two are indigenous peoples from the Philippines, are very young people, age 17, and one I guess is 19 years old. These two boys were accused to be rebels by the Philippine government. And what the military or the soldiers did is to arrest them and torture them. And after that, they dug up a hole and threw these two boys in that hole, poured gasoline on their body, and burned them alive. So they got third-degree burns on their bodies, but they managed to escape and tell their stories to the nearby community. So that's what the situation of indigenous peoples in the Philippines as they fight for the right to self-determination. Basically, whenever they organize themselves, whenever they resist these policies of the government, they were being suppressed. The government wanted them to remain ignorant of their rights, so as to not organize and fight for their rights.
En aquesta altra fotografia el que podem apreciar és una comunitat indígena de la zona sud del país, de Davao, que és la terra del president Duterte. Aquestes comunitats, com ja hem dit, sovint són expulsades de les seves terres perquè els acusen de donar suport al moviment armat del país. Per tant, aquestes comunitats han de marxar muntanya avall, busquen un lloc segur on poder-s'hi estar, a esglésies, a places, a gimnasos, i s'hi passen mesos. En aquesta altra foto de l'esquerra veiem el cas de dos nois joves de 17 i 19 anys que van ser acusats pel govern de ser rebels. Els soldats els van arrestar, els van torturar, després van cavar un forat i els van llançar a dins, els van ruixar de gasolina i els van cremar vius. Per sort, i van patir cremades de tercer grau. Per sort, aquests dos nois van poder fugir i explicar el que havia passat a les seves comunitats. Molts pobles indígenes estan lluitant per la seva autodeterminació i estan intentant resistir al govern, però el govern no vol que les comunitats indígenes coneguin els seus drets perquè després no puguin reclamar.
To the very famous topic in the Philippines, when President Duterte became the president, when he was elected in 2016, he promised that he will wipe out illegal drugs in the Philippines, which is, of course, it's good. But the problem is that he focused on the small-time drug peddlers, so that we call it not really war on drugs, but war on poor. According to the reports of the media and journalists, the number of killings of poor people in the urban areas who've been accused of selling small grams of drugs and involving the use of drugs would reach up to 27 to 30,000 killings. But the government said it's not true, it's just 6,000 killings and not 30,000. But whatever the data is, it means that they admitted to killing poor people who they allege to be using drugs. And these people are not even tried in court. They were deprived the right to defend themselves in court. As you see, the photos here in the background are the families of the victims of the drug war. Because of the drug war, a lot of young people have become orphaned. In some cases, both parents have been killed, and a lot of widows were left to make a living for their surviving children.
En aquesta altra fotografia el que podem apreciar és un tema bastant conegut de les Filipines. Quan el president Duterte va assumir el poder, el 2016 es va proposar acabar amb la problemàtica de les drogues, però el problema és que qui van ser víctimes d'aquesta guerra contra les drogues realment eren persones pobres de les zones urbanes de les Filipines que davant la falta d'oportunitats laborals sovint es veuen abocades a traficar en petites quantitats de drogues. Segons els mitjans, a Filipines s'han produït entre 27.000 i 30.000 assassinats a les zones urbanes. El govern de Duterte només reconeix o admet 6.000 d'aquests assassinats, però siguin quines siguin les xifres, encara que només n'admetin 6.000, estan reconeguent que han assassinat a persones pobres. Moltes d'aquestes persones no tenen accés a la justícia i a la fotografia que podeu apreciar s'hi veuen les famílies de les víctimes. Com a resultat d'aquesta guerra contra les drogues han quedat molts nens i nenes orfes o també moltes dones que han quedat vídues i han de sortir a guanyar-se la vida.
And so because of this situation in the Philippines, it's really enraging that we can't find justice in our own country. I think very few policemen who are involved in the drug operations are being tried in court. And so because of this, the victims and the families of the drug war went to the International Criminal Court to file a case against President Duterte. Our president is currently facing a case for crimes against humanity for these massive killings that he did in my country. But Duterte was trying to escape accountability, and so that in 2019, the Philippine government withdrew from the Rome Statute. The Rome Statute is what created the International Criminal Court. But the International Criminal Court said no, even if the Philippines withdraw from the Rome Statute, Duterte will be prosecuted for crimes he committed before the withdrawal of the Philippines from the Rome Statute. Now, the Philippine government wrote to the ICC and they were requesting for the suspension of the investigation, saying that they've already investigating 52 cases of extrajudicial killings relating to the drug war out of the thousands. So they were trying to delay or stall the investigation of these cases of President Duterte.
Aquesta situació derivada de la guerra contra les drogues és una situació que genera moltíssima ràbia perquè realment no hi ha justícia per totes les víctimes. Hi ha molts pocs policies que hagin estat jutjats per aquests assassinats extrajudicials i davant d'aquesta situació moltes de les famílies de les víctimes es van unir per presentar una denúncia contra el president Duterte davant del Tribunal Penal Internacional acusant-lo d'haver comès crims contra la humanitat precisament per aquests assassinats. El que passa és que el govern de Duterte ha intentat en tot moment aturar aquesta investigació, es va retirar de l'Estatut de Roma, que és l'Estatut que va donar peu a la creació del Tribunal Penal Internacional, però el Tribunal Penal Internacional va contestar dient que encara que el país s'hagués retirat de l'Estatut de Roma, tenia competències per jutjar aquests crims perquè s'havien produït abans que el govern s'hagués retirat de l'Estatut. Després, el govern de les Filipines va escriure de nou al Tribunal Penal Internacional demanant que suspenguessin aquesta investigació i dient que ells ja estaven investigant aquests assassinats per compte propi, però només estaven investigant uns 52 assassinats dels milers que s'han produït en el procés i per tant està intentant fer tot el que pot per endarrerir o entorpir aquesta investigació al Tribunal Penal Internacional.
sorry, this is President Duterte, in case some of the audience who are watching us don't know his face. This is President Duterte. His term ends this year, and we will be electing another president. But during the course of his administration, he's made a lot of pronouncement in relation to the drug war. This is one of it, and it shows how he has utter disregard to human life. And I will quote, President Duterte said, "I will never apologize for the death of those bastards pertaining to the killed people in the drug war. Even if you kill me, even if you jail me, my promise and law and order is law and order, and I will focus on drugs." He said that on January 4, 2021, on the deaths of the suspected drug peddlers in police operations.
Aquí en aquesta fotografia podeu apreciar la cara del president Duterte, que aquest any acaba el seu mandat, i durant el govern, durant el seu mandat, ha fet moltíssimes declaracions incendiàries. En aquest cas veiem una cita que va pronunciar el president Duterte, qui per cert no té cap respecte pels drets humans, i va dir que mai no se demanaria perdó per l'assassinat d'ella, es va anomenar cabrons o alguna paraula pareguda, semblant, i va dir que encara que el matin, encara que l'empresonin, la seva promesa sempre és llei i ordre.
Now I go to the situation of human rights defenders and activists like me in the Philippines. I don't know if you have heard this, but in the Philippines we have this thing called red or terrorist tagging. Basically, its objective is to vilify people who are defending human rights. They say that if you are an activist, you are a terrorist / a communist. They don't really differentiate the two. Even if you're a communist, you have some kind of ideology, a terrorist doesn't have, but they put it in one basket and they all tag you as an enemy of the state. And this is a very dangerous practice because a lot of people, a lot of my colleagues who have been experiencing attacks like killings, murder, and illegal arrest or filing of trumped-up charges have previously experienced red tagging before they were there's grave human rights violations that's committed to them. It's like creating an impression to the public that if you are red tagged as a communist or a terrorist, it's fine if you later died or arrested because anyway you're an evil person and that you deserve to be killed or to be put to prison.
Una altra activitat que, quant a la situació dels defensors de drets humans a les Filipines, una altra pràctica que fa el govern és assenyalar-los i acusar-los de ser terroristes o comunistes. Òbviament, una persona que es defineix com a comunista doncs, té una ideologia, un terrorista no, però el govern no distingeix entre aquests dos conceptes i això és molt perillós per als defensors de drets humans, aquesta pràctica d'assenyalar-los i d'acusar-los, perquè molts dels defensors i defensores de drets humans que han estat assassinats o detinguts o contra qui s'ha presentat acusacions falses en el passat o anteriorment havien estat assenyalats amb aquesta pràctica. Amb aquesta pràctica d'assenyalar els defensors de drets humans, el que intenta fer el govern és legitimar aquests assassinats davant l'opinió pública com a manera de justificar que els hagin matat o detingut.
And you can see that red tagging in the Philippines is really a state policy because in 2019, they created a special task force to go after activists and human rights workers like me. They created this very long name for a task force. It's called the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict. But the main objective of the task force is to respond and raise awareness of the ongoing rebellion in the country. But in reality and on the ground, what it does is to attack people like us, those who are actively defending human rights in the Philippines. And this task force is being funded by the taxpayers' money, Filipino taxpayers' money, and is headed by high-ranking generals from the Philippine military.
Com a part d'aquesta pràctica, l'any 2018 el govern de les Filipines va crear una oficina especial que es dedica a perseguir els drets humans, els defensors dels drets humans. En teoria, aquesta oficina té com a tasca lluitar contra els rebels, però en la realitat el que fa és atacar i perseguir els defensors i defensores dels drets humans. És una oficina que està finançada amb fons públics i està liderada per comandaments de l'exèrcit filipí.
So this is, well, red tagging happens online and offline. Online, it's easy because there's a lot of trolls, but some government verified, it's verified, the one with the check on Facebook, verified accounts are red tagging people in the Philippines, activists like this. These are some of my colleagues, activists in the Philippines. They've been proliferating this kind of lies and disinformation, saying that our members, these activists, are fronts of the communist group or a terrorist group. And it's very dangerous for us to be tagged by the government itself because, as I've said, it comes later with very serious implications such as killings and arrests.
Aquesta pràctica d'assenyalar els defensors i defensores de drets humans es fa en línia i també per altres mitjans. S'ha pogut verificar que hi ha perfils oficials de diferents estaments del govern que assenyala i escampa informació falsa sobre molts dels defensors i defensores de drets humans, els acusa de formar part de grups terroristes i això és molt perillós perquè hem pogut veure com moltes de les persones que han estat assenyalades pel govern i acusades de ser terroristes o comunistes després han estat detingudes o assassinades.
In some cases, we have this like offline red tagging where some of the undercover from the military is printing faces of us in posters and like posting it in the posts, in the plaza, in the public places. And it has our faces and our name saying that we are like wanted people, we are terrorists or communists, and they're like directly vilifying us in public.
Aquesta tasca d'assenyalament també es fa mitjançant la publicació a places i espais públics de cartells on hi posen les cares dels defensors i defensores de drets humans, acusant-los de ser terroristes, i això és molt perillós perquè, com hem dit abans, després de ser assenyalats, defensors i defensores de drets humans acaben assassinats o detinguts.
This is an example of the one I personally received. This is my name, Sol Taule, the one in the underline. This article was released by the task force that I told you earlier. And I was surprised when I received this news. It's published on July 5, 2021. It says that I am a high-ranking party member of the communist terrorist group. And I act as a lawyer for the rebel group called the New People's Army. So I was really worried when I received this news that I was put in this article by the task force because it's putting me in danger, and not just me, also my family. I mean, it's such a baseless accusation. But this is the kind of the price that we pay for doing our work. And what we do is we expose this kind of lies, this kind of disinformation in public.
En aquest cas veiem un exemple d'un article que va ser publicat per l'oficina aquesta que hem mencionat abans, que lluita contra els defensors i defensores de drets humans. És un article que es va publicar l'any 2021 on apareix el nom de Sol Taule i on l'acusen de ser un membre prominent d'un grup terrorista comunista. Això, Sol, quan va llegir aquest article es va espantar perquè suposa un problema no només per a ella personalment, sinó també per a la seva família, però aquest és el preu que han de pagar per fer la tasca que fan de defensa de drets humans.
So this is some of the actions that we made to at least counter the attacks against human rights defenders in the Philippines. We filed for a petition for writ of amparo. It's a remedy that you can avail of in the Philippines whenever you feel that you are threatened. But the court easily dismissed our petition. So you can see that we are really helpless. All our legal efforts remain futile, and that's it's so important for us to come here in your place, in your country, to say that we have exhausted all that we can in our country, but it's nothing is happening. We went to the ICC, we went to the UN, and we need more voices to help us pressure the Philippine government to stop these kinds of attacks against us.
Aquí veuen algunes de les accions que ha emprès l'organització Carapatang. Ha presentat mesures d'empara davant dels tribunals que és el que es fa quan hi ha persones desaparegudes, però els tribunals repetidament han rebutjat totes aquestes peticions. Per tant, els defensors i defensores dels drets humans es troben indefensos i per això és tan important poder ser aquí, perquè a nivell nacional han exhaurit ja totes les vies possibles a nivell judicial, han acudit al Tribunal Penal Internacional i davant de la ONU i necessitem que hi hagi més veus que donin suport a la nostra causa.
This writ of amparo was filed in 2019. Our basis for the filing of the petition is that a lot of the human rights workers of Karapatan are already under attack. We've been receiving threats, we've been receiving surveillance. A lot of our human rights workers on the ground, they notice that motorcycles are parked in front of their houses and noticing their kind of routine. When are they going out of the house? When are they coming back? And because of that, we filed this kind of remedy called the writ of amparo. We were not given the opportunity to explain and to give us a chance to articulate our petition, but instead it was dismissed a month after we filed it.
Aquí veieu una diapositiva d'una de les mesures d'empara que es van presentar davant d'un tribunal. Molts dels defensors i defensores de drets humans es troben amenaçats, es troben vigilats, hi ha motocicletes que aparquen davant dels seus domicilis, els segueixen en el dia a dia per saber quines són les seves rutines i quan presenten mesures d'empara davant dels tribunals ni tan sols poden explicar o argumentar aquestes mesures d'empara, simplement el tribunal els rebutja.
One of the witnesses in the petition that we are supposed to present in court is this young guy. His name is Ryan. Ryan reported to us that he's experiencing tailing from military forces. So we included that allegation in the petition, but again, it was dismissed. So that after the petition was dismissed, Ryan was not able to testify, and on June 15, few weeks after the petition was dismissed, he was gunned down in his hometown in southern Philippines together with this elderly human rights worker. The two of them were shot by armed men riding on a motorcycle, and until now we don't know who did it. But before Ryan was killed, he's being tailed by we suspect to be state forces.
En aquest cas veiem dos defensors de drets humans que van ser assassinats i per als quals es van presentar mesures d'empara davant dels tribunals. Un d'ells és el Ryan, que és un noi jove, que és activista que treballa defensant els drets humans. Va trucar a Karapatan dient que estava sent perseguit i seguit per les forces militars, però no van permetre que Ryan oferís el seu testimoni davant dels tribunals i, de fet, poc després de que rebutgés la mesura cautelar sol·licitada per Karapatan, Ryan va ser assassinat juntament amb una altra defensora de drets humans, una dona gran, que van ser disparats per homes armats que circulaven en motocicleta i no se sap a dia d'avui qui són els seus assassins.
One also of the witnesses in the petition for writ of amparo that we're supposed to present in court is Zara Alvarez. Zara has been red tagged before she was killed. You see this poster at the back of her face? That's her in the red circle. That's a poster that's been posted all over her town saying that she is a member of a communist terrorist group. Before she was killed, she also received that text message written in her local language saying that she will be the next to be killed. And right after that, Zara was gunned down. She was shot in close range by unidentified men in the middle of the night while she was on her way home. So the two witnesses that we have in that petition were already killed, and the government wouldn't believe us. The Philippine government wouldn't want us to be granted that kind of security by granting our petition.
Aquí veiem un altre cas, la Zara Alvarez, que havia de ser testimoni en un dels casos que portàvem davant dels tribunals i que va ser assenyalada en públic pel govern. Com veieu, darrere de la seva cara hi ha una imatge d'un pòster que va ser enganxat pels carrers i places del seu poble acusant-la de ser membre d'un grup terrorista comunista. Uns dies abans de ser assassinada, va rebre un missatge de text dient que ella seria la propera en morir i efectivament uns dies després 2 homes armats no identificats la van assassinar de nit mentre ella tornava al seu domicili. Per tant, el que veiem és que sovint les persones que han de testificar per argumentar i suportar els nostres casos són assassinats i sospitem que les persones que hi ha darrere d'aquests crims són membres d'actors estatals no identificats.
And even doctors in the Philippines during the pandemic is not safe. Philippine government are killing doctors who they believe are to be helping rebels. So they killed Dr. Merero Sancelan. She's a doctor in one of the provinces in the Philippines. This is a list that they've been circulating around her town, saying that she's a member of a terrorist communist group. And sure enough, she was killed in a motorcycle together with her husband. They were both shot. Another doctor, Maria Lourdes Tanco, was also killed while inside her house, also in 2020 during the pandemic.
No només maten activistes dels drets humans, també hi ha metges que ajuden a les persones més desafavorides que són víctimes d'aquests assassinats. Veiem el cas, per exemple, de la Maria Rose Sancelan, que va ser acusada de formar part d'un grup terrorista comunista. El seu nom va aparèixer en un llistat que es va distribuir pel seu poble i després també tenim el cas de la Maria Lourdes Tanco, que va de nou aparèixer, la van acusar de donar suport al grup terrorista i ella i el seu marit van ser assassinats mentre es tornaven a casa en motocicleta el 2020, enmig de la pandèmia.
A veteran activist, Bernardino Patigas, was also killed. He survived a massacre in the 1980s during the dictatorship of President Marcos, but he did not survive the administration of President Duterte. That's him. I blurred his face. He's on a motorcycle on his way home. He was shot also close range by unidentified men.
En aquest cas veiem el cas d'un activista veterà, Bernardino Patigas, que va ser assassinat. El senyor Patigas havia sobreviscut a una massacre durant el règim dictatorial de Marcos, però no ha pogut sobreviure al règim de Duterte. Ell també tornava a casa en motocicleta i va ser assassinat per 2 homes no identificats.
And this one is, this case just recently happened last year in March 7, 2021. It was a Sunday. I vividly remember it. It was Sunday and my phone was constantly ringing. I didn't know why. It's 7 o'clock in the morning and my phone kept on ringing. And that's when I learned that a lot of activists in Calabarzon, it's a place near Metro Manila, the capital. The houses of activists were raided by the police and fired at them. And so 7 people or 8 people in the background, the one on the poster, were simultaneously killed in different places. They were shot. And one of the victims, their couple, those two are couple, they were killed in their house with their 10-year-old boy. The 10-year-old boy managed to survive. He hid under the bed. And he was the primary witness in the case because he saw how his parents were made to kneel down and shot by the police forces.
Aquí veiem un altre fet que la Maria Sol recorda molt bé. Es va produir al març del 2021, era un diumenge, i Maria Sol recorda que ben d'hora al matí, a les 7, el seu telèfon no parava de trucar i va saber llavors que diversos activistes dels drets humans a una zona propera a la zona metropolitana de Manila havien estat assassinats. Pel que sembla, la policia havia irromput en els seus domicilis i els havia disparat. Són unes 7 o 8 persones que veieu en aquesta diapositiva, els cartells, i van ser assassinats simultàniament a diversos llocs. Dues d'aquestes víctimes eren una parella que tenien un nen de 10 anys que va presenciar aquest assassinat. Per sort va sobreviure perquè es va amagar sota un llit i aquest nen és el testimoni principal en el cas i va poder constatar com van obligar els seus pares a agenollar-se i es van disparar.
And so that day was called the Bloody Sunday killings because of it's a Sunday. during that time, and this simultaneous police operations killed a lot of activists in the Philippines. Apart from those killed, a lot were also arrested in their offices and their homes and were detained by the state forces.
Com hem dit, és un fet que va ocórrer en diumenge, es coneix com el diumenge de sang, i a banda d'assassinar aquests 7 o 8 activistes, molts més van ser arrestats o bé a casa seva o a les seves oficines.
Well, those that managed to survive attacks in the Philippines, they are alive, but they are in jail. Those that have survived killings and murders, some of them are facing trumped-up charges. There are now 700 political prisoners in the Philippines, and this is the breakdown of the number of political prisoners. But interestingly, more than half of the 700 were arrested during the administration of President Duterte. You might wonder why, because simply President Duterte, as I've always said, is very intolerant of dissent. He hates critics. He don't want to be criticized. And those who criticized him, he can easily file a case against them, even though it's fabricated, it's false, it's made up. But these poor people are powerless. They can go to jail anytime whenever they were arrested by the police or the military.
En el cas, no tots els defensors i defensores de drets humans són assassinats, aquells que tenen més sort sovint acaben empresonats, sovint se'ls acusa amb càrrecs falsos per empresonar-los. Aquí veiem que hi ha 700 presos polítics actualment en el país i d'aquests, curiosament o no, més de la meitat s'han produït durant el govern de Duterte. El president Duterte és una persona que no tolera cap crítica ni cap dissidència i, per tant, en qualsevol moment pot fabricar un cas i presentar acusacions falses per empresonar els defensors i defensores de drets humans.
Now, these are some of the faces of the 700 individuals. I chose some of them because some of these are emblematic cases. One is a doctor who's facing charges of kidnapping. She recently was released from detention, but still facing threats. And one is an elderly political prisoner, Nympha Lanzanas, is around, I think, 60 plus years old. She's part of the Bloody Sunday victims who were arrested. So some were killed and she's part of those arrested. And the police barged inside her house at 3 o'clock in the morning and planted long firearms in her small house with grenades. So the narrative of the police is that she is a terrorist. So they planted firearms to fit their narrative. And this one is Reyna Maynacino. She is actually my client. I represent her in court. She's been detained since 2019. At the time she was arrested, she's pregnant. She was in the office when she was arrested. She was sleeping in the office, and then suddenly the police officers barged in and arrested her together with 2 others. She spent her pregnancy inside the jail, and after she gave birth, the jail officers did not allow her to breastfeed her baby. They were forcibly separated, and after 3 months, the baby died. And then we tried to ask the court to allow her to attend the burial of her baby, to attend the wake of her baby, but they initially did not allow us to grant that simple request. But we appealed, and finally she was allowed to attend the burial in that kind of suit because it's still pandemic during that time, and handcuffed. But do you know how long was she allowed to attend the burial of her baby? It was just 3 hours. So she was given 3 hours to grieve by the Philippine government. Another pregnant woman, another new mother, Amanda Echaniz, it's just a week after she gave birth when she was arrested by police officers. It's the same story. The police officers and the military barged in her house and planted firearms and explosives, bombs, grenades, to fit the narrative that she's a terrorist. And she's just given birth at that time. And so Amanda and her baby is still now in prison. The baby is turning 2 years old and she's still detained there.
Aquí veiem algunes de les cares d'aquests defensors i defensores de drets humans que han estat empresonats. Veiem el cas d'una metgessa, per exemple, que ara ja ha estat alliberada però que havia estat a presó. Veiem el cas també d'una defensora de drets humans, una dona gran de més de 65 anys, que va ser arrestada després que la policia irrompés a casa seva i introduís granades i bombes per poder-la acusar de formar part d'un grup terrorista. Després veiem el cas de la reina May, per exemple, que és clienta de la Sol Taule, que va ser empresonada l'any 2019. En el moment de ser arrestada, la reina May estava embarassada i, de nou, els policies van irrompre a la seva oficina, la van arrestar juntament amb dues persones més. Reina May va donar llum a la presó, els oficials de la presó no la van deixar alletar el seu nadó i el nadó malauradament va morir uns mesos després. En aquest cas, l'organització Carapatan va presentar un recurs davant el tribunal per permetre que Reina May pogués assistir al funeral i enterrament del seu fill. Inicialment el tribunal no ho va permetre, però després d'apel·lar, finalment sí que va poder assistir al funeral del seu fill vestit amb aquest dispositiu de protecció personal i només va poder ser-hi 3 hores per fer el dol. Després tenim el cas de l'Amanda Echanis, que de nou la policia va irrompre a casa seva i va introduir bombes i granades per poder-la acusar de ser membre d'un grup terrorista. L'Amanda va donar llum a la presó ja, només una setmana després de ser... havia donat a llum una setmana abans de ser detinguda i tant ella com el nadó són a la presó. El nadó ara ja té 2 anys.
Also, some very young human rights workers are also imprisoned in the Philippines. This one, Frenchie May, is a journalist, a very young journalist. Alexander and Renalyn are full-time human rights workers of Karapatan May organization. All of them are facing trumped-up criminal charges, unbelievable criminal charges that they will never commit. And they are not allowed to post bail because their cases are non-bailable.
També veiem el cas de 3 joves defensors i defensores de drets humans. Tenim el Frenchie May, que és periodista, tenim l'Alexander i la Renalyn, que són membres de Carapatan, i tots ells van ser empresonats amb acusacions falses, amb històries rocambolesques que no sostenen per enlloc.
I told you earlier that there's a long, Philippines has, I don't know if I mentioned this, Philippines is the longest running insurgency in, I think, Southeast Asia. It's almost more than 50 years. And this is because, well, the farmers don't have their own land to till. 75% of Filipinos are farmers. And so, to address the root causes of armed conflict, the National Democratic Movement in the Philippines initiated peace talks with the Philippine government to address these kinds of problems. Why are there people joining the armed revolution? It's because of the injustices. No social services, no land for the farmers, indigenous peoples are being displaced in their communities. The peace talks went off until 2017, and then President Duterte terminated the peace talks. And those who participated in the peace talks were killed, later on killed by the Philippine military. I'm sorry, I was not able to change the name, but this couple were also killed by the state forces. They're like 70-years-old couple. This one is Randy Malayao, shot inside a bus while he was sleeping. Randall Echanis was tortured before she was murdered in her own home in 2020.
Filipines té una de les insurgències que fa més temps que existeix al sud-est asiàtic, fa més de 50 anys que hi ha aquesta insurgència armada en el país, i això és perquè sovint els agricultors, que com hem dit, pobres, que representen un 75% de la població, estan reclamant el dret a tenir propietats de les terres. Per mirar de posar fi al conflicte es van establir unes converses de pau amb el govern de les Filipines per mirar d'esbrinar per què la gent s'unia a la revolució armada, i la gent s'unia a la revolució armada perquè no hi ha justícia al país, no hi ha serveis socials, els agricultors no tenen accés a la terra, els pobles indígenes són desplaçats de les seves comunitats, però el president Duterte el 2017 va posar fi en aquestes converses de pau i van assassinar moltes d'aquestes persones que van participar en les converses de pau. Aquí veiem diverses de les persones que hi van participar. Hi ha el cas d'una parella, gent gran de més de 70 anys, la Randy Malayo i el Randall, que van ser assassinats en un autobús.
Some others were arrested. Those that participated in the peace talks were arrested. These are some of the names of those who were arrested by President Duterte when he single-handedly terminated the peace talks and launched a crackdown against the left and all the activists in the Philippines. He arrested all of these people, and they're now detained and facing numerous criminal charges.
I a banda d'aquells que van morir, moltes altres persones que van participar a les converses de pau han estat detingudes. Com ja hem dit, el president Duterte de manera unilateral va decidir posar fi a les converses de pau i a continuació va perseguir i detenir a totes aquelles persones que hi havien participat.
Now I'm going to the last portion of my presentation. Now, after hearing all of these issues, very serious issues of human rights in the Philippines, what can we do? How can you help us? Of course, we need your help, and I'm really thankful for this project. The Cities Defending Human Rights, because it's my first time in Barcelona, and it's very important to us to have this space. I'm sure most of you, it's the first time you have heard all of this kind of situation in the Philippines. And now, we are pushing for international accountability because, as what I've told earlier, we are really desperate in seeking domestic remedies in the Philippines. We want you to be with us, to stand in solidarity with the Filipino people, to keep pushing for the international accountability mechanism that's now in place before the United Nations Human Rights Council and the International Criminal Court.
I ara ja passem a la part final de la presentació. Hem vist la difícil situació que hi ha al país pel que fa als drets humans i ha arribat el moment de veure què podeu fer tots vosaltres per ajudar. Estic molt contenta de formar part del projecte Ciutats Defensores de Drets Humans. És la primera vegada que vinc a Barcelona i aquesta mena de projectes i espais són molt importants per intentar aconseguir justícia a nivell internacional. Necessitem la solidaritat de tothom, necessitem pressionar perquè els mecanismes de rendició de comptes que s'han posat en marxa davant del Consell de Drets Humans de les Nacions Unides puguin tirar endavant i necessitem la solidaritat internacional. Gràcies.
In the Philippines, we also have this anti-terrorism law. In July 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, when the world is facing this kind of crisis, the priority of the Philippine government is still to go after its critics. And that's why President Duterte acted together with his allies in Philippine Congress to press for the passage of this draconian legislation called the anti-terrorism law. And the anti-terrorism law loosely defined who are terrorists in the eyes of the Philippine government, and it could probably include people like me, journalists, critics, dissenters, and we feel that this is directed against us. And recently, many members of the civil society organization questioned 47 petitions questioned the constitutionality of the anti-terror law. But recently, the Philippine Supreme Court declared that this law is constitutional. And so we are in danger in the coming months, days, that this will be filed against us. And so we call on people to help us call for the abolition of the anti-terror law and also the task force that's been red tagging activists in the Philippines.
El juliol de l'any 2020, enmig de la pandèmia, el president Duterte va seguir perseguint a la dissidència i va aprovar una llei antiterrorista. És una llei draconiana que ofereix una definició del terme terrorista que és molt ampla, no? Pot abarcar molts supòsits i es fa servir aquesta llei per perseguir els defensors i defensores de drets humans. Per tant, hi va haver també moltes persones provinents de la societat civil que van presentar qüestions parlamentàries posant en qüestió la constitucionalitat d'aquesta llei, però fa uns dies només el Tribunal Suprem del país va donar el vistiplau en aquesta llei antiterrorista i és molt perillosa pels defensors i defensores dels drets humans. Per tant, el que volem és el suport internacional perquè s'aboleixi aquesta llei antiterrorista, així com també l'oficina que es dedica a perseguir els defensors i defensores de drets humans.
And lastly, we have the Philippine presidential elections on May 9th. It's a few days away from now. We are under a looming leadership again of another Duterte and the son of the former dictator who's running for president. So now in the Philippines, it's election time, and the allies of President Duterte is leading the surveys, whether it's true or not. But we are very much concerned that this will affect the coming years in terms of seeking accountability of the victims, because there's a pending ICC investigation against President Duterte, and if his allies win these elections, we are sure that this investigation will not pursue, and he will do anything in his power along with his allies to stop this kind of investigation, and the victims will be left again with this kind of injustice. And so we want you to closely monitor the upcoming presidential elections in the Philippines. I know the Marcoses, the family of the Marcos have been toppled by the Filipino people through the People Power Revolution in the 1980s, is now coming back after 30 years and now running again as president, the highest post of the land. And we are in danger of undergoing the same situation that we've been through 30 years ago. And I hope you will closely monitor what's happening in the Philippines in the elections, and help us call for a fair, clean, transparent election. Especially, we expect the worst. We expect that there will be fraud and that the Marcoses and Duterte will not easily give up their power because they are under the eyes of the international community now because of the various human rights violations that they have done against the Filipino people. That's all. Thank you and gracias. Good day.
Dates properes, el 9 de maig, ja celebraran eleccions presidencials al país i correm el risc de que es repeteixi la mateixa situació. En aquest cas, el fill de l'antic dictador Marcos i la filla de Duterte s'han presentat a les eleccions i el que és preocupant és que en aquests moments estan liderant totes les enquestes. Per tant, si acaben guanyant les eleccions, això en el futur farà molt difícil que es pugui buscar justícia per a les víctimes d'aquests assassinats, perquè faran tot el que podran per evitar que tirin endavant aquests processos internacionals. Per tant, cal que seguim amb atenció el que passi en aquestes eleccions. Estem veient com 30 anys després que el poble de les Filipines enderroqués la dictadura de Marcos, ara torna a intentar ocupar el poder i, com hem dit, és un perill que es pugui repetir la situació que vam viure al país fa 30 anys. És important que vetllem per aquestes eleccions presidencials del país perquè siguin unes eleccions netes i justes, perquè tenim por que hi pugui haver frau i, com hem dit, si les famílies Duterte i Marcos segueixen al poder, això segurament posarà fi a tots aquests mecanismes internacionals que intenten buscar justícia per les víctimes.
If you have some questions to what I presented, I can entertain some of the questions, or if you need something to clarify or react to, can also be good.
Si teniu qualsevol pregunta o voleu que afegeixi alguna informació, necessiteu qualsevol aclariment, la Maria Sol estarà encantada de contestar.
Bueno, en mi caso pregunta no, simplemente tanto por parte del ayuntamiento, del alcalde y en mi caso como la regidora del área de Ciudad Defensores de Drets Humans, darte las gracias La verdad que ha sido, bueno, una exposición bastante, ¿cómo te lo podría explicar? Bastante, bueno, llega bastante al corazón. La verdad es increíble que en el año y en el siglo en el que vivimos todavía exista en diferentes países esta mentalidad política. En ningún caso aquí ni en Europa se lleva esta mentalidad. Desde el Ayuntamiento de Barberá se fomenta y se ayuda a las ciudades defensoras del Drets Humans. Estamos totalmente en apoyo condicional desde hace muchos años, trabajando con vosotros y dando la ayuda necesaria. Simplemente por mi parte y creo que por parte también de mis compañeros, darte las gracias. Ha sido una charla muy bonita y muy enriquecedora a nivel personal. Espero y deseo de corazón que las nuevas elecciones, de acuerdo, en tu país no salgan los hijos de esta persona, de este dictador, le podemos llamar dictador, ¿de acuerdo? Y que en adelante podáis ser un país pues como lo erais, ¿no? Libre y bueno, que podáis luchar por vuestros derechos, que yo os animo a que sigáis luchando por vuestros derechos, es lo que tenéis que hacer y creo que algún día lo conseguiréis. Muchas gracias por todo.
Thank you too for listening. It's very important for me. And of course, I wish to be back in Barcelona, but not as a participant in this project, but as a tourist, so I can go around. But not to retell the same stories. I know it's really hard for us because it's the last day of our project today, of our tour today, and I've been repeating this presentation to various schools and institutions here, but it's still different every time I say it because these people who have been killed are not just colleagues; they're friends to me. I've known them for so long, and it frightens me that what happened to them could also happen to any of us. And so I'm here, still alive in front of you, and whatever happens, I mean, we will still do what we are doing in the Philippines. It's a very important task, I think, and we will keep you updated with what is happening in the developments in the elections in the Philippines.
Moltíssimes gràcies per escoltar-me. És veritat que és difícil sovint escoltar aquestes presentacions. Avui és l'últim dia de l'edició de primavera de Ciutats Defensores. He fet aquesta presentació en diferents escoles i espais cívics i cada vegada és diferent, no? Hem de pensar que moltes d'aquestes víctimes, defensors i defensores de drets humans, no només són companys de feina, entre ells hi compten molts amics i amigues i és preocupant saber que el que els ha passat a ells li podria passar a la Maria Sol en qualsevol moment, però tot i aquest neguit i aquest perill és important seguir fent la tasca de defensar els drets humans. Gràcies.
Perdoneu, una cosa. Jo volia també agrair, com la Mònica Madueño, a Sol Taule, la seva intervenció. Penso que després de les seves paraules, després del seu testimoni, és molt difícil dir qualsevol cosa, o sigui, ens hem quedat tots molt flagrats per la seva intervenció. És increïble que en el 2022 estiguin passant aquestes coses al món i la meva pregunta, suposo que no me la podrà contestar, però és què fa la comunitat internacional, com es pot permetre que això estigui succeint en un país civilitzat com diríem que és Filipines, en un món civilitzat com és el nostre, i això de civilitzat una miqueta entre cometes, i demanar una miqueta, a part del suport que dona l'Ajuntament de Barberà del Vallès, ens ho ha dit l'alcalde i els membres de l'equip de govern, però demanar-vos quines mesures de seguretat personal teniu, perquè després de les vostres paraules, de les teves paraules, una miqueta sí que patim perquè això estigui passant avui en dia, o sigui, patim per la seguretat personal inclús de la Sol.
Yeah, it's really hard. Well, personally, I haven't seen my family for a long time. Because I don't want them to be dragged in this kind of situation that I'm facing. So I'm working closely with my colleagues, and so whatever threats that I would be facing, they're with me. And I think it's more dangerous for lawyers and human rights workers living in the rural areas because there's not much media coverage unlike me, I'm living in the capital, but I still experience these kind of things. But at least whatever threats that I would be facing, if there would be surveillance or red tagging, I could easily like call my friends from the media. But that is not the same for my colleagues who are living in the province, because there's not even electricity there. So no one would know if you get killed. So it's really hard. But yes, now I always update my colleagues whenever I am out for work or just even attending a court hearing, so they would know when I'm coming back to the office, simple things like that. But I guess some of us are not really lucky, because I have a colleague, also a lawyer, who's now here in Barcelona seeking asylum. She's been lawyering for indigenous peoples in the Philippines, and now she's tagged as a terrorist there. She's facing charges as a terrorist in the Philippines, and she's no choice. She's previously moved to Netherlands to seek asylum, but as I remember, she told me that the government of Netherlands would want her to return first to the Philippines and go back in Netherlands, but she can't go back. The moment she steps her foot in Philippine airport, she will be arrested. And so she went here in Barcelona, and her application for asylum is pending. I mean, I'm still not in that level of danger, but we might not know, but I hope not, that I will be here for seeking asylum. I don't know still, I don't have plans, but my plan now is to continue my work in my country.
Doncs, personalment, la Maria Sol diu que fa molt temps que no visita la seva família perquè no vol que es vegin arrossegats en aquesta problemàtica. En quant a mesures de seguretat, ella personalment no té mesures de seguretat o dispositius de seguretat. Treballa molt a prop i en constant contacte amb els companys i les companyes, i Maria Sol viu a la capital, a Manila, on no és tan perillós pels advocats defensors de drets humans, tot i que ho és. És molt més perillós fer aquesta tasca de defensa en les zones rurals, perquè no hi ha una cobertura mediàtica del que passa en aquestes zones rurals. A les zones rurals, per exemple, no hi ha sovint ni tan sols electricitat, per tant, si et maten com a defensor o defensora de drets humans, ningú no ho sabrà. En el cas de Maria Sol, si ha de viatjar per feina o ha d'anar a una audiència, els tribunals sempre avisa als seus companys de quina hora té previst tornar a casa perquè estiguin al corrent, però sí que hi ha una companya defensora, advocada, defensora de drets humans de les Filipines, que en l'actualitat es troba aquí a Catalunya, tot un programa d'acollida. Ella ha sol·licitat asil perquè a les Filipines ha estat acusada de ser una terrorista. En un primer moment va viatjar als Països Baixos per sol·licitar asil, però el procediment d'asil d'allà dels Països Baixos exigia que abans de poder sol·licitar asil havia de tornar a les Filipines, però aquesta companya no pot posar un peu a les Filipines perquè ha estat acusada formalment, i en el moment de posar un peu en terres filipines seria detinguda immediatament. Ara la Maria Sol està aquí a Barcelona, espera i desitja no haver de demanar asil ella tampoc, però i de moment doncs, seguirà realitzant la seva tasca de defensa dels drets humans. Gràcies.
Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you.